Welcome to the EPG course in linguistics and to its paper called Morphology and Syntax. My name is Prabal Dasgupta. I work at the Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata. And in this module, which is called Some Classical Landmarks, my objective is to familiarize you with some of the classical landmarks in the standard theory of transformational grammar. It is a good idea to take a tour of the landscape first and then settle down to particular problems and their solutions. One of the major landmarks of the work done in that period is the study of tag questions. A tag question appears in an example like, Roshmi is very lively, isn't she? Isn't she is called a tag question in the sentence, Roshmi is very lively, isn't she? Here you can see that the tag question echoes part of the auxiliary, part of the verbal system that shows up in the auxiliary. Is an auxiliary in Roshmi is very lively. When you have a sentence like Tenzing and Hillary climbed Mount Everest, didn't they? You might be initially puzzled because the tag question has a didn't, and did doesn't appear in the sentence. Tenzing and Hillary climbed Mount Everest. You might wonder why this is happening. Actually, even though we don't pronounce the sentence as Tenzing and Hillary did climb Mount Everest, even though we pronounce it as climbed Mount Everest without a did, it is possible to argue that the sentence in some sense really is Tenzing and Hillary did climb Mount Everest. Why do we say this? If you think about it, when people stress the sentence, they say Tenzing and Hillary did climb Mount Everest. They do not say Tenzing and Hillary climbed Mount Everest. In all the other cases where the auxiliary remains apparent with or without stress, like we shall overcome with emphasis and we shall overcome without emphasis, the auxiliary remains identical with or without emphasis. So in the case of did, if the emphatic version is Tenzing and Hillary did climb Mount Everest, you would imagine that the unemphatic, unstressed version should come out as Tenzing and Hillary did climb Mount Everest, with the did unstressed. That is not what people say. Where you would expect that to appear, instead they say Tenzing and Hillary climbed Mount Everest. Therefore, syntactically, you can imagine that climbed is really doing the job of did climb, where the did is not stressed. That elaborate argument comes out in response to our looking at the tag question, which is echoing what appears not to exist. In fact, it does exist. The reason the tag question is didn't they in the sentence Tenzing and Hillary climbed Mount Everest, didn't they, is that the tag question ferrets out a secret of climbed. Climbed is really did climb in some sense, which we will make clear when we get around to the auxiliaries. Remember that auxiliaries in English are a difficult topic, that we will reach that topic only towards the end of the course. Another example where a tag question ferrets out a secret of the main clause is imperative main clauses. If you take a main clause, open the door, and add a tag question, you get, open the door, won't you? Which indicates that there is a will hiding there in the imperative. It also shows that there is a subject hiding there in the imperative, the subject you. We therefore assume, we postulate, a transformation to handle imperatives, which is called imperative deletion. In other words, deletion in sentences that are imperatives. It deletes two things: the hidden pronoun XU and the hidden auxiliary X will. These are both volatile elements that get deleted to yield the imperative surface structure, open the door. We know about the need for imperative deletion because there are tag questions. You will ask us, why do you have these volatile elements there? What are you doing with them? If there is nothing in the surface structure, why not say that there is nothing in the deep structure? Well, tag questions are part of the answer. Open the door, won't you, shows that in the deep structure for open the door, there is something like will and something like you. Otherwise, won't you makes no sense as a tag question. You may have the opposite question about volatile elements. You might say, okay, if you have to put something there in the deep structure and then delete it for these reasons, if you're saying that the volatile elements carry the meanings involved, the imperative meaning and the you meaning, why do you make them volatile elements? Why do you attach this X that says they're marked for demolition? Why not have the deep structure, you will open the door, won't you, and then delete the you and the will? The answer is that you can say you will open the door. And when you say you will open the door with an actual overt you and an actual overt will, non-volatile overt elements, you don't get an imperative sentence. You get a sentence with the auxiliary will expressing future time. Remember that it doesn't carry future tense because English doesn't have a future tense. You will open the door, won't you, is a different sentence from the imperative sentence, open the door, won't you. What expresses the imperative is the special auxiliary X will, which is a volatile counterpart to will. It has all the properties of will, but is not pronounced. That enables it to carry the imperative meaning. X will has the imperative meaning. Will has the future time meaning. These are different elements in the deep structure, though they have many properties in common, which is why they elicit the same echo in the tag question. We are not saying that deletion only targets volatile elements. Deletion can also target full-blooded, non-volatile elements. Here's an example. John said that he would deliver the goods, and I'm sure that he will. This surface structure corresponds to the deep structure. John said that he would deliver the goods, and I'm sure that he will deliver the goods, where the verb phrase deliver the goods is an honest-to-goodness, full-blooded, full-throated verb phrase with a non-volatile deliver and a non-volatile noun phrase, the goods. And it gets deleted. But the deletion is optional. You can say the sentence with the VP intact or without it. When you say it without it, clearly you have deleted the VP. You've carried out what's called VP deletion. This is an example where non-volatile elements get deleted. Notice that the deletion is optional when that happens. VPs don't always get deleted. When they want to do something, they sometimes move to the front of the clause. From a sentence like Bill said he would win the race and he did win the race, with an emphatic did, remember, you can derive the surface structure optionally. Bill said he would win the race and win the race he did. The transformation that is applied here, which is an optional transformation, is called VP fronting. The one that applied earlier was called VP deletion. These names are perfectly transparent. When you have these operations targeting verbs and their neighbors, the target isn't always the whole VP. Sometimes instead what gets deleted is the sequence of auxiliary plus verb. We'll give you an example. Susan will take chocolate, Julie will take strawberry, and Mary will take butterscotch, if you want to say the whole thing like that. Or you can say, Susan will take chocolate, Julie strawberry, and Mary butterscotch. In the e-text, we display these examples for you, and when we display Susan will take chocolate, Julie strawberry, and Mary butterscotch, where the aux verb sequences have been deleted. At the deletion site, we show a long underscore. Such an underscore marks what is known as a gap. This is to help you to remember that this particular transformation is called gapping. Gapping has a very curious property. It was noticed in the 1960s, in the early days of transformational grammar research. If you say these sentences in Bangla, which is a verb final language, gapping operates backwards. What you get is Susan chocolate khabe, Susan chocolate will eat. Julie strawberry khabe, Julie strawberry will eat. Or Mary butterscotch khabe, and Mary butterscotch will eat. This is gapped into Susan chocolate, Julie strawberry, or Mary butterscotch khabe. So the final verb remains intact and the left hand and middle verb disappear. This is the opposite of English, where the left hand aux verb sequence remains intact and the middle and the right hand one disappear. Surprise, surprise, in Bangla word order is free. The verb can appear in the middle of the sentence if it wishes to. The verb can appear to the left of the object if it wishes to. When it does, Bangla mimics the English manner of applying gapping. So you get from the initial form, Susan khabe chocolate, Julie khabe strawberry, or Mary khabe butterscotch. You get Susan khabe chocolate, Julie strawberry, or Mary butterscotch, which is exactly like the English sequence. So the way gapping applies depends on not the language, but whether in that particular sentence, whether the verb is final or medial in the clause. If the verb is final, then the absolutely final occurrence of the verb remains intact and the other occurrences disappear. If the verb is clause medial, the first copy of that verb remains intact and all the second and last copies die. That is how gapping operates. In Bangla, it looks like the verb, which is why I've been cutting corners and saying the verb is deleted. In English, you see clearly that what is deleted is the verb with an auxiliary that it takes along. While we are looking at the major landmarks in the classical theory, it is important to mention heavy noun phrase shift. A noun phrase that carries a lot of weight, one which is full of lots of long words, or one which carries heaviness in the form of phonological stress, gets shifted to the right. Instead of saying, Tom placed the most intriguing commodity of all times on the market. The heavy object, the most intriguing commodity of all times, gets shifted to the right. So it becomes natural to say, Tom placed on the market the most intriguing commodity of all times. If the noun phrase is not heavy, shifting it sounds unnatural. Thus, instead of Hank placed his comb on the market, you don't say John placed on the market his comb. That is a very unnatural sentence. But you can say John placed on the market his comb. If you shout it and express surprise or amazement or something, that allows his comb to count as heavy, and then moving it to the right does not sound so bizarre or so strange. Just as heaviness plays a role in this transformation called heavy noun phrase shift, you can go back and look at an earlier transformation, the transformation called particle movement, which takes a particle out of the verb particle construction and shifts it to the right. You will discover that whether the particle shifts or not depends on how heavy the constituent is that immediately follows the particle. This we leave for you as an exercise, but you will find in your exercise that the verb particle construction is as sensitive to heaviness as the construction of heavy noun phrase shift itself. In order to understand more clearly the whole idea that the deep structure carries the meaning of the sentence, that the transformational derivation cannot touch the meaning, and that the surface structures are merely what we called allo sentences a few modules ago, we need to introduce to you another crucial convention governing the way we use transformations. This convention was put in place in the 1960s. It is known as the recoverability of deletion. Your best way to remember the principle called the recoverability of deletion is to remember a joke. This joke was cracked by two linguists in 1974. With a straight face, these two linguists published in a major periodical of the field an article to which they gave the title Non-Recoverable Syntactic Deletion. Everybody looked to see what they were saying because they were talking about violating one of the most important principles of syntax. And they went to the page and found that the article with the title Non-Recoverable Syntactic Deletion is a blank page. Everything has been deleted, so you can't read what the authors want to say. What they illustrate by cracking such a joke is that if material has been syntactically deleted in such a way that it cannot be recovered, you, the reader or the listener, will get nothing at all. And if you get nothing at all, you have no basis for recovering what the speaker or the writer was trying to say. That is the essence of the principle of recoverability of deletion. If a transformation ever deletes anything, there has to be a way for the listener to find out what was deleted. What do we mean? If something is deleted by a transformation, that means it's an element present in the deep structure. Therefore, to get the meaning of the sentence, you need to know what that element is. You need to recover it if it's been deleted. If you cannot recover what the element is, then the transformation is destroying the tree beyond recognition, and then the surface structure doesn't count as an allo sentence. The transformations are not doing their job. They're doing much more than their job. It's like an editor of a newspaper article. You've sent an article and the newspaper is going to print it. The editor says, I'm an editor, I have the right to delete sentences, and the editor deletes everything you've written. So the following morning, you see your article appear in the newspaper. Your photograph is there, your name is there, the title of the article is there, and then there's a blank page. That's what the editor is doing, interpreting their brief much too intensely. You can't do that, right? Editing is an art. You have to keep a certain balance. Syntax is like editing. If something is deleted, there has to be a way for the reader to find out what was intended. How can deletion be recoverable? What are the ways in which a transformation can guarantee that material deleted can be retrieved by the reader or listener? One way is if there is a list of elements. These are elements that tend to get deleted. Watch out for them. If you see something missing, fill it in. Imperative deletion deletes the subject you and the special auxiliary x will. Well, the subject xu, if you wish. These are designated elements. They are elements that are subject to deletion. You can expect them to be deleted. Now, you can quibble about this. Imperative deletion is a nice example to quibble about. Go home, I say. You retrieve xu and x will and you understand that I really meant you will go home with the u and will volatile. But if I say see you, in see you, the underlying form is not you will see you. The underlying form is I will see you. How does the listener know that in see you, What is deleted is I, and that in go home, what is deleted is you. You know this from the context. See you doesn't make sense if you supply the subject you. It only makes sense if you supply the subject I. So the designated elements are partly dependent on the context. There is a way to find out which of the designated elements may have been deleted here. The other way, the deletion can be recoverable if there is a copy left. For example, John said that he would win the race, and he did. What you have deleted is the second copy of win the race. VP deletion always deletes a copy. Here, what has been deleted is a second copy, which therefore was co-referential to something else. Co-referential items are often deleted. If you want to convey the idea John wants a victory by John, you say John wants to win. You don't say John wants John to win. Why? Because the subject of win, which has been deleted, is understood as being co-referential with John. This kind of deletion is called deletion under identity. So there are two kinds of recoverable deletion. Deletion of a designated element, which comes from a small list of elements that are vulnerable and likely to be deleted, and deletion under identity. This is not just a principle governing deletion. If you take a deep structure like 3 men who look really belligerent just arrived, and you perform extraposition and get 3 men just arrived who look really belligerent, we said this a few modules ago, that isn't really extraposition, though we called it that at the moment. That is extraposition from NP. It takes a clause out of a noun phrase and places it on the right. There is also real extraposition, where a clause as a whole is moved to the right, and where it originated from, you insert a special pronoun it, which is a dummy. Suppose you take a clause that Rahim smokes and move it to the right from the sentence that Rahim smokes bothers Javed. The result of extraposing that Rahim smokes in that sentence is the surface structure. It bothers Javed that Rahim smokes. What is that it doing there? It is what is called a pleonastic subject or an expletive subject. These are fancy ways of saying it is meaningless, it is a dummy. Insertion follows the same principle as recoverability of deletion. It doesn't have a name, you can call it warrantability of insertion. You delete something if the listener can retrieve it. You insert something if there is a good reason to insert that material, and if you're inserting that material does not affect the meaning. What does that boil down to? It boils down to inserting only meaningless elements. Why? Because if you insert a meaningful element in a transformation, you're trying to add meaning. You're doing that in the wrong place of the architecture. Anything expressing meaning was supposed to be present in the deep structure, because the deep structure is what will feed the semantic interpretation process. The semantic interpretation rules don't see your transformations, they don't see the surface structure, they only see the deep structure. So if your transformation inserts a word like fish or bird or bookcase or fan, there is no way for the semantics to know that these meaningful elements have been added to the stuff. That is why transformations are not allowed to add anything meaningful. If they must add something for a good reason, it has to be meaningless. That is what is meant by warrantability of insertion, which is the equal and opposite of recoverability of deletion. Because deletion and insertion are opposite processes. Deletion takes something and turns it into nothing. Insertion takes nothing and turns it into something. That is why we gave you the example where extraposition leaves a blank in subject position. English hates a blank subject, so it forces you to insert it. which does a placeholder's job. It holds the place of the subject. The last section of this module is the last of the classical landmarks we want to show you on this guided tour. This section has no exercises because it's about material where you will find no transformations apply. And at this stage, we're giving you exercises concerning only transformations. This section is about polarity. If a sentence is of the yes type, it is said to have positive polarity. If it is a sentence of the no type, it is said to have negative polarity. That's what polarity is about, the yes and no dimension. Remember the tag questions, which we mentioned at the very start of the module. Turn the polarity of the sentence into its opposite. So you get, you wanted ice cream, didn't you? Yes becoming no. You didn't want ice cream, did you? No becoming yes. That is what tag questions are like. Polarity doesn't only affect the verbal complex and add a negation or subtract a negation. Polarity also affects other words in the sentence. You can say this twisted tabletop hurt somebody. You can see the blood on the tabletop. If instead of saying this twisted tabletop hurt somebody, you turn the hurt into the negative hasn't hurt. You say this twisted tabletop hasn't hurt anybody. You don't say this twisted tabletop hasn't hurt somebody. You don't talk like that. You say anybody. So there's somebody in the positive polarity version of the sentence and anybody in the negative polarity version. When generative syntacticians were first working on negation, they noticed this fact, that there are some items that only appear under negative polarity. They gave a name to this phenomenon. They called them negative polarity items. And those other items like somebody were called positive polarity items. Since we like abbreviating, we say NPI and PPI. Right? Back then, it was also noticed that it doesn't only happen under negation, it happens also under affective contexts, such as, I wonder if this twisted tabletop has hurt anybody. I doubt whether this twisted tabletop has hurt anybody. Those are called affective contexts, even if you don't have negation. It was later noticed, after they went through all the trouble of creating a transformation to turn PPIs into NPIs, to turn some into any, to turn somebody into anybody, and feeling very happy that they discovered a new transformation. It was noticed that there are many NPIs that don't come from PPIs. For example, I don't give a damn what you think. A damn is a negative polarity item. In that sense, it appears only in negative polarity contexts. But you can't have a transformation turning something else into a damn. You cannot say, I do give a blank what you think. There is no word that you can use in I give a dash what you think. So there is no word that can turn into damn. I've given some more examples from Bangla and Hindi in the e-text to show you that there are items that appear in negative polarity context, but they don't come from any other source. So you can't match them with anything appearing in positive polarity context. And so you can't use transformations to generate them. As a result of this later discovery about NPIs, the study of negative polarity shifted from syntax, where we work with transformations, into semantics, where people directly look at the meanings and the landscapes and the environments in which particular kinds of meanings make sense or don't make sense. Semantics is even harder than transformational syntax. If you think this is a difficult course, wait until you study formal semantics. It's 10 times harder. If you want to study NPIs, you'll have to learn a lot of formal semantics. Best of luck. It's time now to wrap up what we've done in this module to make it easier for you to utilize what we're offering. We began the module by saying, let us survey the landscape of classical transformational work and show you some major landmarks. We began with a landmark that everybody who knows that period of work will recognize, the study of tag questions. We showed you what tag questions are important for. They're a very good diagnostic device. They help you to ferret out the secrets of the main body of the clause, especially its verbal complex. They help you to ferret out when there's a hidden auxiliary. For example, in imperatives. Then we spent some time discussing which volatile elements are present in imperative sentence deep structures and what happens to them. We talked about the imperative deletion transformation that gets rid of the subject and the auxiliary in these sentences. We discussed the merits and demerits of deleting only volatiles and deleting other things in that context. After we went through some of these other landmarks, we took you to really difficult questions of theory concerning recoverability of deletion and the corresponding principle, the warrantability of insertion. We gave you examples all the way so that there was enough hand-holding and you never felt that we were doing pure theory for its own sake. At the end, we showed you a few facts about polarity items. Even though there is nothing operational that we need to teach you about them, you don't have to learn how to do any transformations because it turned out when they were studied, the transformations don't apply in this case. We did it nonetheless because if you go through a syntax course and haven't heard about polarity, you'll have a lot of catching up to do. That was all in this module. We need to remind you, of course, that it's always important to study the e-text. Repeatedly during this oral exposition, we've drawn your attention to matters that are done in detail in the e-text that we're not repeating orally. It is also important to follow up any reading suggestions that the system has given you. If you have any questions or criticism, please do not hesitate to contact us. Thank you for your patience.